Hey, I'm Rob Simopoulos, co-founder here at Defendify. I'm excited to talk a little bit about cybersecurity today with everyone. We have a special guest joining us today. We should do like a drum roll. Go ahead, reveal yourself.
Are you talking to me?
Of course, you're the special guest.
I didn't know if we had another surprise guest. It happens. We roll like that all the time. I'm Shanna Utgard. I am the success manager here at Defendify. If you're one of our partners, we've probably worked very closely.
Awesome. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about recent incidents that have occurred here in the cybersecurity world. We're going to talk about threats that are really impacting organizations today, talk a little bit about what a cybersecurity program is, and how organizations today are taking steps to protect themselves. During the presentation, we are going to have different areas where you can begin to answer some poll questions that Shanna's going to run us through. And the goal behind that is to sort of get a better idea of how everyone on the call is dealing with cybersecurity. So please participate in that. I think it'll be really great to see how everyone's doing and what everyone's doing in regards to cybersecurity. I'm going to stop my video for a second so I can focus on presenting to you all the different information we have here. And with that, I think we're going to get started. Shanna, we ready to go?
We are totally ready to rock and roll, and I will be moderating this. I will do my best to help, and then I'll be launching those poll questions Rob mentioned.
Thank you. All right, let's get started. So first off, if you're here because you're thinking about cybersecurity, you want to make improvements, you're not alone. Even top US CEOs, this is their number one thing that they're thinking about right now. Their number one external concern is getting cyber threats under control and protecting their organization properly. So kudos for you for being here. Let's talk about some different stories and things that have happened. This one goes years back, but it is an interesting one. Anthem was breached, millions and millions of people affected in this incident, losing, critical health information, personal information. And when the deep dive forensics was done, they realized that everything all started with a phishing email. The other interesting part was that, that phishing email resulted in those cyber criminals actually positioning themselves inside the network, and they were actually in there for quite a long time. You can see in the slide there that the hack began in about 2014 in February, and by the time they were discovered that they were inside the network was almost a year later. That's a long period of time. This is a recent one that I thought was really interesting because it wasn't a big enterprise organization. It was a small company, and this person here got really aggravated with the company that she was working for. And she decided that she was going to delete the Dropbox where the company was storing all of their company information. She did that, for revenge, and really impacted this company. Basically, the company had to shut down when they were done. They did not have their information anymore. But you can see here that, she was tagged as a cyber criminal, and there were things that she had to do in order to, help that company get back. But in the end, just was not possible. This university up in Canada, MacEwan's, they were building a bunch of new buildings on their campus, and they received an email from the construction company saying, hey, we want to make sure that you make the payments to the right place. We're changing banks. And if possible, could we, coordinate that the payments get made to our new banking location? So the finance teams, from the university were coordinating with the construction company and making sure everything was changed. And they ended up paying the invoices that came through to a total of $11.8 million, but that was actually provided to cyber criminals who were acting like the construction company, who fooled the finance team on the other side. It was all through a phishing scam, a really, really significant amount of money. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how these types of scams and frauds occur. So this is our first poll question. I think it's really important that we sort of define it a little bit. So have you ever had a cyber attack at your organization? So a cyber attack could be phishing emails coming at you, someone trying to fool you via emails. It could be somebody actually breaching into your systems. It could be somebody who had valid access into your network, who did something that they shouldn't have done. Let's get the polling going. So have you ever witnessed a cyber attack at your organization before? All right, why don't we go ahead and tell us what the number comes out at, Shannon?
Okay, so 69% of people said yes, which was funny because 3 people had put no in there originally before you had really explained that, and only one more answer came through as no after that. So I'd be curious if those first 3 voters would change their opinion.
So here's some research that was done, which is really interesting. 68% of small businesses have experienced a cyber attack in the last 12 months. So that lines up perfectly with everyone and what they've stated here on this webinar, that it's obvious that organizations are having incidents. And just to share more on that, I think we know today that it's not just enterprise organizations, small businesses, which is really categorized as 500 employee and less organizations, they're having lots of incidents as well. So an interesting comparison is looking at what organizations have done to protect themselves from a physical perspective, breach perspective. For a small business, the average loss from a breach, starts at $117,000 and works its way up from there. We know for enterprise organizations, it could be much, much more. But in the exact same way, companies need to be protecting against these types of risks on the security side in the same way they're doing it on the physical side. So access control systems, alarm systems, storing their data securely, policies and plans, training their teams, all really, really important. Now, the interesting part around small business, that 500 employee and less organizations, is that this is what the majority of them look like. So they have a firewall between the internet connection and the network, and maybe some antivirus on their computers. That's quite often the extent of their cybersecurity program. Nowhere near comprehensive enough today to have the right type of protection in place. Now, one of the things to think about is that every business today has some type of sensitive data. And we talk to a lot of companies who say, hey, we don't have credit cards. No one wants to get to our data. But I think that's totally wrong today. If you start thinking about your organization and categorizing the data that's being stored on your computers, your mobile phones, your email systems, and so forth, start thinking about what that data is. And the best way to put it is, if you're not willing to take that data, that file, and put it on a public facing website, then it's probably sensitive enough that it needs to be protected accordingly. And when you start really digging in and starting to do sort of an analysis of what the data is, categorizing it, you start to see, yeah, you know what, there's tax documents, there's HR records, there's vendor agreements and price lists, there's legal documents and contracts, customer sensitive data. So you may be doing business with organizations and storing their floor plans or their manufacturing designs, all types of different things as well. All of this type of information needs to be protected today. Cyber criminals would love to get their hands on this type of information. So, step one is doing, a data classification and understanding what is the data that you have, where is it stored, and how does it need to be protected. There are a number of different types of threats that can impact a small and mid-sized organization today. The top left corner, cyber criminals causing their crimes to make money. The top right, hacktivists who do their actions for political reasons. They don't like a political party or a company and so forth. The bottom left corner, cyber soldiers in the United States, in Canada, in other countries. This is the real thing, whether it's an offensive nature or whether it's in a defensive nature, but cyber soldiers is a real thing. And then also the insider threat, which is in the bottom right corner. Insider threat is an employee, a contractor who has or had valid access to the data at some point in time. And in my opinion, I think that especially for a lot of small to mid-sized organizations, that is a huge threat to an organization because they have access to it. They can do anything they want with it. As a great example is that story I shared with you about the Dropbox being deleted. That employee had valid access to it, got angry and decided that they wanted to do something to compromise that situation, as a revenge attack. So I mentioned that cyber criminals are causing their crimes to make money. Here's some great examples of what that data could be sold for in the dark web, the dark net, those forums where they sell information. Social security numbers for $1, credit cards, $5, credit card with fulls info. That basically means the credit card has lots of more information. The more information on an individual or a company in one spot, the more valuable it's obviously going to be. Maybe it's got a mother's maiden name or an address or more information included. And then medical records continue to top the charts. There's a lot of information that can be provided through medical records, including personal identifiable information, insurance information that possibly could be used for fraud, number of different things that could occur there. Huge value. There is also the fact that, if you were able to get medical records on an individual, you may be able to use that as a cyber criminal to perhaps even cause them to get nervous about what's happened. So for instance, maybe the CEO of the company had some type of defined illness and it hasn't been publicly disclosed. They could use that against them to try to, extort money from them or something like that. So all kinds of different tactics that can occur as well. And I'm gonna spend a little bit of time talking about ways that cyber criminals might go about their crimes. The number one means is phishing. So this is the act of sending a fraudulent email at somebody and trying to get them to interact with that in some way, shape, or form. There's the Nigerian princess who has a bunch of money. She wants to get out of her country. That's been rolling around for quite a long time. But now these attacks might be more specific. It could be a banking incident, a banking email that says, hey, we want to make sure you're safe. There's a lot of phishing activities logged into your bank account. Perhaps there's an email from FedEx. You've got a shipment coming for you. Got to be wary of that. And then in times of need, and especially right now, we talk about disaster reliefs, grants and loans, coronavirus news, all these different types of things that make people perk up at their computer workstations and start diving in and wanting to click on those links and learn more. These are all intriguing things. So anytime there's a situation where there's need, attackers are going to use that as a methodology to send their emails. I also want to share that social media too. So when you get this LinkedIn request from somebody saying, hey, I want to connect with you on LinkedIn, and they want you to click that button, that could also be a phishing email trying to get you to take you to the next step, which will probably take you to a page that looks like LinkedIn, which will have you try to put in your login and your password, which potentially could be a credential harvesting attack. And I want to share also that there's pretexting that occurs too. So here's an example of an email from me going to Shanna. This cyber criminal is, acting like they're me as the CEO of the company, trying to get Shanna to go do something. This is the setup for that classic gift card scam where, Shanna replies, I start asking her to go buy gift cards and scratch off the backs and give me the numbers. We saw this roll around last year quite heavily. A lot of employees fell for that and ran out with company cards and bought those gift cards. So be really aware that they're not always trying to get you to click a link or open a file. Sometimes there's pretexting involved where there's communication back and forth with those cyber criminals. Now, how is this all happening? There is so much information about us here today in the world. You can go on LinkedIn, Facebook, I can go on your website and read about your company and the leadership team and all the employees there. If your company is doing anything great in marketing, they're talking about their company and what they're doing too. And as a cyber criminal, you can spend a lot of time just doing research on an organization or a specific employee and then launch your email campaigns specifically at them. A great example here would be that university, which I shared at the beginning. I have no doubt that that university was probably sharing a lot of news and marketing stuff about, hey, we're building new buildings on our campus. It's really exciting. We're working with XYZ construction company. Well, once that's out there, any cyber criminal could look at that and say, hey, what a great opportunity. I can start sending some emails to the finance team, see if I can change bank accounts, and maybe they'll send me the money instead of the real organization. As an employee sitting at a desk or the business owner or leadership, anyone who's receiving emails inside of your organization, which also includes contractors and interns, they should be in a position to understand what these attacks look like. And when they send these emails, they're really trying to get you to do one of four things. Fill in a form, click on a link that's probably going to take you to a malicious website, have you open up a file that's there, an attachment that's embedded, which may cause malware and so forth. And then the final one is getting you to do an action. Send some confidential information, pay an invoice. Those are really the four key things that they're going to try to get you to interact with. The secret here is really just verifying first. If you get an email that was totally unexpected, you did not expect it has one of those four things, that person receiving it should verify in a separate means of communication with that organization or that person before they interact with it at all. These are it. Fill in a form, click on a link, open an attachment, do an action, reply with confidential information, verify first. And again, in a separate means, so not via that email that you originally got. Now, I want to share also that we're talking about technology here. So it's not just emails being used as attack methods. There's other ways too, such as even using a telephone. Dialing into an organization and talking to somebody and targeting an executive assistant or a receptionist, a salesperson, someone on the finance team and trying to get them to do things. And, the recent results of this Twitter hack that happened about a month or so ago, it's now coming to light where we're learning that, these cyber criminals basically called into the Twitter employees, acted like the help desk, and then were able to compromise their machines and caused their hack, where they actually were able to, take over specific high profile accounts and start sending Bitcoin deals to people through those accounts. It all started with phishing emails, using the phone, talking to somebody, acting like the IT team. In this case, they were actually talking about the VPN network. So they would actually send them to, it's reported that they would send them to a VPN site that looked like Twitter's and have them put in their credentials to log in, including credentials with multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about in a little bit more. There's also text message attacks too. So we talked about emails, we talked about the phone being used, text messages as well. Maybe your Apple ID is about to expire. Click on this link. Again, might take you to a website that looks like Apple ID site. It's really not it. And they're gonna, when you put your login and password, the page might crash, and next thing you know, they've obtained your credentials. And then recently, researchers, an interesting article here, have realized that, LinkedIn or social media accounts where there's direct messages being sent, could be used to spread malware as well. So when people are connecting with you on LinkedIn and sending you those direct messages with, hey, check out my site, here's a PDF for you, here's an article for you to read in those direct messages, be really careful. A lot of people connect with LinkedIn users and they don't even know who they really are, whether they're really them or not. And they're just really quite often random people. So be really careful in those cases too. I want to take a second and just talk about ransomware. So if you're not aware of what that is, it's basically when a cyber criminal is able to encrypt the data on your computers and servers, locking you out and demanding some payment of ransom in order to unlock it again. Their Bitcoin and other types of digital currency is quite often what's being requested. And what you're seeing on the screen is a couple of examples of what that looks and feels like, but it's basically, hey, go to this website, pay us X amount in digital currency. Once we get that, we're going to unlock all your files because we're going to provide you a code that you're going to enter in there. All your files will come back and everything's going to be A-okay. And you know what? They'll actually even set up ways for you to communicate back and forth with them because they want to make sure that the transaction happens because it can be worth some significant funds. Now, some people think, well, why not just give them the money? If we give them the money, then everything's fine. They'll give us the code and everything will unlock. Well, 50% of organizations that do that don't even get their files back. So that decryption key doesn't work and they're stuck there, out of funds with no money. And you know what, the thing is that also that we're seeing a huge spike in ransomware. It's reaching now, 2016, it was $1 billion, 2019, $11.5 billion. And if we continue to fund cyber criminals for ransomware, we're going to continue to see more and more and more crimes happening. Now, interesting, a couple of weeks ago, the US Department of Treasury, they just announced that organizations, if they're considering paying the ransom to cyber criminals, they need to start thinking twice. Many of these countries where these individuals are, the actual cyber gangs are sanctioned, and paying them or interacting with them with funds or funding them in some way, shape, or form could be illegal. And the US Department of Treasury is asking organizations to contact them if they're considering paying the ransom to these cyber criminals before they do, because they may be under this category. So something to consider. And there's organizations who have done this many times, and I think that the times are changing. Now, one step even further is that cyber criminals, when they're causing their ransomware attacks, quite often organizations will have really strong backups in place. So they'll just ignore the criminals, bring the backups back into check, put their systems back up and running, which may have some downtime, because if you have to wipe all your machines and servers and start from scratch, that can be pretty devastating period. But cyber criminals are realizing now that, hey, if we can actually take the data before we encrypt it, then we can hold them hostage. So what we're seeing happening now is they're going to start to release some of that information publicly, that sensitive data, which I shared, or we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. They're going to put it out publicly. They're basically saying, hey, if you don't send us the money, we're going to start putting this information out publicly, which is going to impact your business as well. So again, these are criminal organizations. They're not nice people. And we're seeing all types of different things happening. The key here is trying to prevent these things from happening and having a plan in place. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. Now, the Internet of Things is exploding. So everything is becoming IP enabled if it's not already, riding on network, communicating to the cloud. By 2025, 75 billion devices doing that. Interesting thing to remember is that all these devices at some point in time should have a patch or an update released. Now, when you go into, let's just talk about your cell phone for a second, your smartphone. When you go in there and there's a new update showing up and it's saying, hey, do your update now, that update might have some great new features. That's awesome. But sometimes, quite often, there's security vulnerabilities that have been discovered and they're being patched or updated in that security update. And that can happen in all types of different devices. It could be printers, it could be your security cameras, it could be the audiovisual displays in your systems or your printers or your computers. And the fact is that when those patches and updates are released, it's really important that they're applied. And so what that's called is a vulnerability management procedure. So basically identifying quite often through scanning tools that you have devices that are in your network, on your network, that have known vulnerabilities that have been discovered. Using those scanning tools will produce you a list and will say, hey, this device here has a critical or a medium vulnerability, and you need to do an update or a patch to that device. So vulnerability management today is becoming a very, very important part of cyber programs at organizations. And later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about what a comprehensive program looks like, and you'll see how vulnerability management is a big part of it. Let's talk about passwords for a second, everyone's favorite topic. We're going to move to our next poll question. Shannon, do you want to walk us through the different options?
Absolutely. So this poll question is, what's your password posture? So the options are: employee makes their own passwords, we don't dictate rules. We have some policies and controls in place for employees and password usage. We have advanced policies and controls, including two-factor authentication everywhere possible, or all of our passwords are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or admin, or any other recycled repeating password.
Password 1.
Just password, all lowercase.
So let's have everyone vote. I think it'll be interesting because this is a tough spot for a lot of organizations. They haven't quite figured out how they're managing passwords with employees.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, I was reading a recent article, and they said that it's almost a small business almost has or has around 50 different software as a service applications that their employees log into.
I believe it.
Password management's pretty challenging.
Okay, so our results here are that 15% employees make their own passwords, 46% we have some policies and controls in place, and 38% advanced policies, two-factor authentication. Nobody's using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is funny because there's a lot of people out there. Ranks in all of the top passwords year after year after year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through all the way up through 9 because of obviously complexity requirements.
Absolutely. Here they are. The most common passwords used in 2019. Number
Look
1,
at that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And amazingly, number 10 is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So these are the type of passwords that are most commonly used by employees as well. And you've got to consider that if the people who work inside of the business use the same passwords for their personal life, which might be one of these that you see here, they're probably going to bring it into your organization and use that same password, unless you do have policies and procedures and ways of controlling that in some shape or form. One of the things that continues to be discussed is the fact that the length of the password is the most important thing. The longer the password, the more strong it is. So you're seeing more and more applications when you log into it wanting to see longer passwords. Here's a great example of a long password. It's got uppercase, lowercase, and different symbols in it as well. But a great example of using a passphrase rather than a password. So a sentence mixed like that. Now, the other thing to discuss is that domino effect. So, the key part about this is that we know individuals love to use the same password for all their systems, and there's a massive risk for that. Let's just play a little scenario out for your organization. You're in the office, back at the office, and someone decides I'm going to order pizza for the company. So that person goes to the website and it says, hey, if you want to order pizza online, you've got to put your login and password in. So they go, yeah, I'm going to use my company email address because I do that because I'm ordering for the company, and I'm going to use the same password I use for everything. Why wouldn't I? That way I'll remember it. So they go and do that. The risk that we have there is that, all it takes is that pizza place that it was ordered online from is for a cyber criminal to hack into that website and obtain those logins and passwords. And once they get those, they're going to look at them. They're going to see, that email address assigned to a company, and they're going to see a password there, assuming they get it in a clear text format. Knowing that 73% of people use the same password for all systems, that's putting an organization significantly at risk. So what those cyber criminals are going to do is they're going to use tools, techniques, technology to try to breach into as many different systems as they can. So they're going to start going after your Office 365 accounts, G Suite. They're going to try financial systems like QuickBooks to see if those logins and passwords will work. And if they get in there, then they've won and they've successful. So really, to show you a little bit more about that, here are some of the biggest breaches that have occurred in the past few years. And you'll see here the things that were obtained. So first off, the breach on the left, the number of accounts in the middle, and then on the right side is, what information was actually stolen. And you'll see in each and every single one of these, it's emails and passwords, emails and passwords, emails and passwords. So, this fact that they could obtain credentials and use that in their crimes is pretty simple, especially when employees use the same password everywhere. So organizations now are trying to figure out and deploy password management solutions. It could be a password manager that's provided to all the employees where they have to store their passwords and do it in a secure fashion. It could be a single sign-on solution that allows an employee to log into one spot with a multi-factor authentication and so on, to log into different sites. But at the bottom, to just sort of bring everything full circle, is that a huge number of hacking breaches are happening from, brute forcing passwords and stolen credentials. So, getting credentials and passwords under check in your organization is really key today. And I'm going to stress it again. You can't just rely on logins and passwords, usernames and passwords. You need to have multi-factor authentication. Any system that you or your employees are logging into today, really, you should enable this feature. And if you're using a software as a service solution or a cloud application that does not have this in place, you should be asking for it. So basically what that means is when you put your login and your password, it's going to send you a text message with a code, or you're going to have an app with a code that changes on it that needs to be entered in before someone can authenticate into the system. So it's that two-step verification or multi-factor verification that occurs to get in there. Turn this on as many systems as you can. I think it's such an important thing today in order to keep an organization safe. Another quick little story. So University of Illinois did a little test. They took those USB keys, those thumb drives, they laid them all over the campus. They wanted to see how many people would actually pick them up. So they put almost 300 of them all over. And when they were done, they realized that about 48% of those USB keys were picked up and plugged into a computer. So someone just got really curious and picked it up and said, oh, I wonder what's on this. Maybe there's some pictures on it or something interesting. What's the risk with that? Well, first off, I hope you've learned today that, any type of attack method where a file could be put onto a computer puts an organization at risk. You do not know what's on that USB key. It could be being used as an attack method. The other thing about allowing USB key usage inside of your environment is you do put yourself at risk of a sensitive data breach. So you can imagine that if you allow employees to store sensitive documents on USB keys, they're going to coffee shops, they're traveling around with their laptops, they're moving from one location to another. It's pretty easy for a USB key to be dropped or left at a location, and someone will pick it up, and maybe they'll probably plug it in their computer, because we know that about 50% of them are plugged back into computers. And at that point in time, you could be at a point where some sensitive data has been leaked to an individual who should not have access to it. In my opinion, I think USB keys should not be used in organizations. There are USB keys that can be encrypted with passwords and codes and so on it. But in the end, getting good USB control in place is important for an organization today too. So this is an area that's really being grown. This is an area that's really impacting small to mid-sized organization. It's called a third-party cybersecurity assessment. And where we're seeing this happening in a huge growth is when those small to mid-sized companies are doing business with an enterprise organization. So this is a company that they're doing business with who probably has full security teams, who understand and review each of their vendors and says, hey, this small to mid-sized company that we do business with, they actually have some of our sensitive data. You know, they have our drawings, they have our floor plans, they have our system designs, they have information about our employees. Let's do a cybersecurity assessment on them. And we are talking to more and more companies every single day who are seeing questionnaires that have 50, 100 questions on it from their top customers, asking them about what their cybersecurity looks like. So as a couple of examples, you know, we've received 5 third-party assessments in the past year. We won the contract, we won the RFP, but we can't start until that third-party vendor assessment is completed. These are the type of things that we're hearing from people. And I think you can expect that it's going to continue. What's happening is that organizations are getting caught off guard. So I want you to be really prepared for this. If you haven't seen these already, expect that they're going to be coming. And if you have received these a couple times, expect that it's going to continue and it's going to continue to grow as organizations start to realize that the people they do business with are actually potential risks to them, and they're factors in their cybersecurity programs, and they really want to understand what the cybersecurity program looks like. In the end, what they want to ensure is that, you know, you have proper posture. And here at Defendify, we talk a lot about that cybersecurity is not a project. It's not something you do once and you walk away from it. It's really a posture. It's something that everybody inside the organization really needs to participate in. And we really believe that, you know, you really need key layers. So you need to have a layer of technology, and that technology today needs to go well beyond, you know, traditional antivirus and firewalls. You need to have cultural aspects of your program as well too. So where your employees and everybody inside the organization is a cyber defender. And then finally, a foundation of policies, plans, and procedures. So that's sort of written in stone so everybody understands what they can do and the process to follow in order to have proper cybersecurity. So I'm going to pose this poll question to you. You know, how would you describe your company's cybersecurity program? Shanna, you want to walk us through the different options?
Absolutely. So we really don't have a program. Our program is simply basic technical controls like antivirus and firewalls. We're moderately advanced, including policies, employee training, and some controls, or we are extremely advanced with a comprehensive program of foundation, culture, and technology. So nobody says we don't really have a program, so that is awesome. 43% basic technical controls like antivirus and firewalls. I am not surprised by that at all. We're moderately advanced, including policies, employee training, and some controls, 43%, so that's good. And we are extremely advanced with a comprehensive program of foundation, culture, and technology, 14%.
Excellent. So everybody can look at that and see where they sit. Perfect. So what I want to do is I want to take a couple moments and just share with you, you know, some ways that you can start to deploy and implement a more comprehensive program inside of your organization. If you don't have a program in place, or you're sort of in that category of just saying, hey, we really haven't got started yet, you know, one of the great places to start is to perform a cybersecurity assessment. A cybersecurity assessment is basically looking at all the different steps that you should have in place from a cybersecurity layered up approach, and looking for gaps. So looking for where you have strengths, where you have weaknesses, and then with most cybersecurity assessments, you can get a grade or a score. So that grade or score can show you, you know, where you stand compared to those different controls that should be in place. But a good cybersecurity assessment should also tell you steps that you can take to start to fix those problems. So if you do have areas of weaknesses, you know, perhaps providing you some basic guidance on how to get that done. And once you start remediating and getting yourself into a better spot, you can take the next steps to redo your assessment and see where you're at again. And that should be something that's ongoing. So there should be a regular cadence of that. Perhaps it's every 6 months or a year, but you should be continually doing assessments on your organization, because, you know, the threats and risks to your business might change. The second area we're seeing people investing now in their cybersecurity programs, as I shared before, is vulnerability scanning. So constantly identifying and scanning to see which computers, servers, devices inside of their network have vulnerabilities that need to be updated and patched. It's sort of like a double check. And when they see critical or medium or vulnerabilities like that, is then taking the steps to remediate. So doing updates and patching those devices and making sure that they're there. Some vulnerability scanners, such as the Defendify vulnerability scanner, will actually even see and check to see if there's default passwords on specific devices, which can be an extraordinary check. I know Shannon and I have seen numerous times where, you know, there's IP-enabled devices that have passwords like admin still left in there. But all these things are key steps to get proper cyber hygiene in place. The next thing that can happen is penetration testing, also called ethical hacking. This is where you hire an ethical hacker to attempt to break into your network and provide back a report. So they'll use tools, techniques, technology to act like the bad people do, to enter your network or perhaps into one of your web applications that you might have, perhaps your website. They can also do it from inside of your network if you have servers on site. So basically acting like if your network was compromised and a cyber criminal was positioned inside it, they could also test to see if they could get to the crown jewels in the network too. But this is a really great way to identify whether, is it possible with someone with some skills to get into the network and cause a cyber crime. And back to the third-party third-party vendor checkups and assessments, we're seeing more and more often where those customers are starting to ask of their customers, their vendors, hey, have you done any penetration testing, and how did you guys do on that test? So be prepared a little bit on that. We talked about passwords and websites being hacked and emails and passwords being stolen. Identifying when your company, your email addresses and your passwords are being traded or sold in the dark web is a great part of a cybersecurity program today too. So if you can get ahead of it and identify what information has been stolen already, it's taking a great step. So there are dark web scanning tools that can be associated with, for instance, your employees' email addresses that will identify if there are passwords that are clear text or hash, different types of passwords, where they might have been compromised from. So you can turn on those tools and actually get reports back that will tell you where you stand. And also, really scanning things that you might not be thinking about. So for instance, your marketing website. Your marketing website is the face of your company. It's where anybody who wants to do business with you is going to learn about your organization. And we've seen lots of situations where a company's website's been compromised by a cyber criminal, and when you click on someone in the organization's name on the team page, it takes you to a casino gambling site and things like that. So just keep in mind that everything about your business needs to be protected accordingly, including your marketing site, and doing vulnerability scanning and website scanning on your website too is a great part of a program. Now, policy development's maybe not the most exciting thing to everybody, but it really does set the rules inside of an organization. So basically, a technology and data use policy will outline to all the employees, contractors, interns, everybody inside the business, what your expectations are when they use company technology, company applications, and so forth. So basically setting the rules. So when you use our computers, you do it this way. When you set up passwords, you're going to do it that way. You cannot do these types of things on our machines. So for instance, you can't do personal banking or personal shopping, all types of cyber rules, and making sure that everybody understands it. Now, where this fits in nicely is if you can do a cybersecurity training for everybody, have them understand why cybersecurity is important, review these types of policies with them and set those guidelines. I think it's a great spot. Now, why I think this is really important is because in today's world, it really varies about how people's cyber posture is personally in their own lives. So there's some people who, might be coming into your organization that have never cared about cybersecurity at all. So they might be totally Wild West in the way they use their computer at home. Those people, when they enter inside of your company and start working for you, you really want to give them those guidelines. You really want to set those rules for them so they understand how they're expected to operate on those computers and applications. So get that in check. The other thing that's really important is an incident response plan. So your incident response plan should outline, what you're going to do in the case of malware, ransomware, a breach of sensitive information, all those things that I showed you today. What are you going to do if these types of things happen? It's like a fire escape plan at your house. You know which door you're going to go out or what window, or whatever the case might be. You need to have that same type of plan in place today for a cyber breach or a cyber incident. We've seen many organizations who have had pretty serious things happen inside their business and not have any plans in place and reach out to us and say, hey, what do we do? Really having that plan, set up and ready to go can be a huge success. Now, I shared a couple times about employees and the importance there. The fact is today, it's not all on the IT teams to ensure that cybersecurity is in place. Everybody has to play a really pivotal point today. So ongoing awareness training for all employees is really important. We need to make sure that the finance team understands, when they receive emails and what they look like and what they should do. And same with the leadership team. They need to understand, the types of attacks that might be coming towards them. And then sales reps need to understand that, even chat, when they're using that in their CRM tool and talking with a prospect, that could be a means of attack too. So ongoing awareness training is really important. And now, I don't believe that should happen once a year. I don't think that's enough. I think that the way that things are moving today, the types of attacks that are constantly being evolved, is that you should be training your team on a regular basis. And I feel a good cadence is once a month. So short, prompt, little videos, educating people about cybersecurity can be key. And that should be tracked and reported too from an HR perspective. So you can check the box to say, hey, we train our team from a cybersecurity perspective every single month, and we track that as well. You'll see in the bottom left corner, it's saying that firms are stating that when they do employee training, they really can reduce the number of cyber incidents, because your employees are the ones who use those tools, your email systems and so forth every single day. Now, threat notification is important too. This is where you're receiving incoming information about recent phishing attacks. Perhaps there's a vulnerability on a piece of software that you use. Perhaps there's a new type of threat that's in the cyber landscape. The more information you can bring into your company, the more aware you can be. So getting ongoing threat notifications into your business can be extremely valuable. And I also want to share that if you don't have this in place, this is available too. It's phishing simulation. So some of those phishing attacks that I shared with you before, the FedEx ones and so on, if you can get phishing simulations at the employees from a training perspective ahead of time, that can be a huge success too. So the way those systems work is they send random phishing emails towards the employees. If they click on the link, if they open the file, it's going to spot train them on what they should have done differently. So, phishing training programs are very popular in organizations today, really trying to educate that user on an ongoing basis. And most phishing simulation systems, you're going to be able to track, how many employees clicked, and really see a reduction in the number of interactions. It really does make an improvement in an organization. And then on the technology side, is really going beyond traditional antivirus and firewalls. So getting proper, protection on each endpoint, thinking about your mobile devices and how you're protecting it. It's unbelievable what a mobile device like a phone or iPhone or Android device, the amount of data that's being stored on that today, especially company data, getting your password management in place, two-factor authentication, having systems that can actually monitor and have people respond if they see strange things happening inside the network. So really taking your technology beyond traditional antivirus and firewalls, and get all the gears going all at the same time. So again, it's not a project where you just do it once. It's got to be running all the time, and you've got to have these different layers in place all running. That's when you're going to start having a really great cybersecurity program in place. Now, I know that folks were saying that they have implemented a program, and I want to talk a little bit about budgets for a second. So I'll let Shanna take over for a sec. Go ahead, Shanna.
So we have a poll question here for, do you have a budget for cybersecurity? The first answer is, we buy cybersecurity when we need it, really no budget, but I get funds when needed. Yes, we plan and execute cybersecurity budget every year. It is when we think we need it via request, approval, and denial process, or cybersecurity budget. What?
Yeah, and I think this is pretty new for a lot of organizations where cybersecurity has never really been, a line item on the expense in the P&L, but that's quickly changing.
So we have pretty good mixture here. 38%, we buy it when we need it, no budget, but I get funds when needed. 38% also, yes, we plan and execute a cybersecurity budget every year. That's fantastic. And then, a request approval denial process, 15%, and cybersecurity budget, what is 8%?
Right. I think there's a huge shift happening here where organizations are starting to realize that cybersecurity budgets are vitally important, and the conversation really needs to be moved into the boardroom with leadership. Not all business leaders understand how important cybersecurity is. So, having that conversation there and talking about the risks an organization may have and so on, and even looking at presentations like we're showing today, so that maybe non-technical individuals or people who don't really understand cybersecurity, so they can get better awareness of what that really means and the steps that can be taken to have better cybersecurity. So this is a difficult one to really get a lot of information on, but we're asked a lot about, what's a proper cybersecurity budget? So from a couple of different resources, this gives you some examples. And the first thing I want to say is that, every single company is absolutely different. Okay, your budget really needs to be calculated, after you do a full review of your current setup, any compliance needs you have, risks and threats facing your organization. So the way that your organization's budgeting cybersecurity could be totally different than ours. But as some examples, a percentage of spend, or a certain dollar figure around per employee. So two ways that organizations are looking at it. The one thing I can share and what I think is happening is that we are starting to see this increase dramatically. So as organizations are realizing that threats are real, incidents can be very costly, we are starting to see investment in cybersecurity to develop comprehensive plans beginning to really move upwards. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue. So if you don't have budgets in place, you haven't really thought about it, it's a great time to start talking as a team inside your organization on how to get that in check. Now, most organizations either have or they still are in a work from home scenario. So we want to provide you some further resources to help you. First off is we developed a checklist for remote workforce. Feel free to go and download that. You can get it at defendify.io/checklist. Second thing we want to share you is another resource. The website's right there, where you can get more information about cybersecurity. So specific organizations that you can go to learn cybersecurity frameworks. Feel free to head to that website, download those resources. They're there for you. If you don't know who we are, Defendify is an all-in-one cybersecurity platform. It's a dashboard. It's got a toolbox. It has 12 different modules in one spot to help deploy a cybersecurity program inside of an organization. And one of the things we want to offer to you is that if you've never used Defendify before, is that you can try it out. So there are 3 free tools that you can go out and deploy today. You can perform a cybersecurity health checkup on yourself. You can turn on our network vulnerability scanner and try one IP address, external IP address, to see if any vulnerabilities are discovered. And you can start getting some of those threat alerts coming into your organization. So feel free, if you don't have Defendify today, go to defendify.io/essentials and you can sign up and begin using that now.
Defendify.io/essentials. It's free tools, no catch. Use it as long as you'd like. Share it with people on your team.
All right, Shanna. Thanks again. We're shutting it down. Appreciate everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.